All right, Kiss Army, welcome to the KissFAQ Podcast. Thank you for giving us your time today and letting us into your head. I hope we don't do any damage. This is a Kiss-related podcast by the board, for the board. We hope that you enjoy. Welcome to episode 244 of the KissFAQ Podcast. I'm your host, Julian Gill. I'm joined today by 69th Blizzard Ken.
Hello.
And not in his office, or in his other office, St. Louis Kiss Lonnie.
Doing the show from the home office, drinking a beer. Woo! What's up, boys?
And you are not hallucinating. He did put that wallpaper on the wall sideways.
Not wallpaper. That is paint, brother.
Well, you
took a long time.
You were there with the tape and the tape measure.
That took a long time. That's what I do. This is what I do on the
duct
weekends.
tape. Colored duct tape.
That looks like hell on earth to paint that.
I was doing it, and I'm like, this is a hell of a lot harder than I thought it was going to be.
Well, obviously, you did not have a six-pack with you because those lines look straight. So, well done. Just going to have one more beer. Ah, shit. Okay, so we got a little bit of news to get through today. First and foremost is anyone who is collecting the KISS RIAA awards, the next two have been advertised in the series. And it's Rock and Roll Over and Love Gun. And I gotta say, the Rock and Roll Over one looks absolutely stunning. My $270 is nearly out of my wallet. It looks so good. Not too chuffed on the Love Gun one for some reason, even though its design principles are basically the same. But they look absolutely fantastic. It seems that they're listening to the feedback, online about people, what they do like, what they don't like, and it's really come together on these latest two. They're getting you to buy the whole catalog. Have you guys figured that out yet? At $270 per album? Yeah. By installments.
I'm not buying it.
Installments.
That's what you say now. I mean, you already have one, don't you?
I do have one. I have the solo albums one.
Yeah, so you already have one. So
I definitely will get a live 2 if they release a live 2.
Yeah, so then you have 2. So but then you won't have a complete set, so there'll be gaps in your wall. You know how they know how to
I'll
get
fill it with other things.
And then they'll do an elder one.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So I have not bought a single one. I don't want any of those, but I will. I have said it before. Mark has better be making some space on his wall for his destroyer one. He is getting a destroyer one. I've said it. I've got to follow through with that, or else I wouldn't be a man of my word. Also, Indie Expo coming up May the 11th and 12th. Get your tickets now. It's going to be a crazy event. I can't wait. John Crabby's going to be there. And I love John. And Bruce is going to be there. So Bruce, Krabby, maybe a little bit of Union. That'd be really nice. But what did come in the post this week, and my stock has arrived in Indianapolis already, and that is the exclusive Indianapolis End of the Road on Tour Leg 1. 75 pages of minutia about the tour, everything that's currently known to date on that first leg of the tour, all the stats, all the sets, newspaper reviews, interview with Dave Garibaldi in there as well, toilet reading material, literally. So that's $10 at the Expo, limited edition, 100 numbered copies there. These are my comps, which are going out to friends like these guys. Once Gene and Paul get their copies, got to send Gene, Paul, Tommy, and Eric theirs, Dave Garibaldi, obviously. So, that'll be there. All my other books are arriving. You're going to have great deals on the latest on tour is massive 6-pound paperback this time. Just $20, or is it 25? Yeah, it's still cheaper than Amazon, so come over and say hi to me at my table. And I think we'll be doing $15 on the few copies of Odyssey and Gap. Gene Ace, Peter Paul. So come say hi, and I'll be recording some stuff there as well. All right, so I think that covers the news. Interviews. There's been a lot of interviews going on lately. A lot of entertainment. So why don't we have a little bit of a discussion today about those? And let's start with, I guess, main thoughts on. Let's start with Vinnie, who appeared on Mitch LaFon's Rock Talk, newly independent. He's like the Casablanca has left the Warner Brothers fold. Mitch's Rock Talk is back in control of himself. But Vinnie was on there, and it's a good 95 minutes. I think if you take out Mitch's brief preamble, good hour and a half of Vinnie just pretty much doing what he does, talk. Lonnie, do you have a chance to listen to Vinnie, and what were some of your major takeaways in that interview?
I did get a chance to listen to it. He was very long-winded and very got off subject quite easily. It was interesting, and it's always good to get a different perspective, because we always get the Gene and Paul perspective. We always get this is how it went, and this is what we've been, and the same shtick that we've been fed for years and years and years, and the shtick that a lot of Kiss fans have accepted to be the truth because it's the only truth they know. And it's interesting to get the other side of it from a different point of view. Now, we all know that there's three sides to every story, that there's the one side, the other side, and then somewhere in the middle lies the truth. So it's interesting to get that other side. And I think that, and there's always truths within each side of the story. So I think that it's interesting to hear what Vinnie has to say and how things went down, and how his lawsuit aspired over the years, and how he felt about it. I hadn't heard this. I guess my biggest takeaway is how he felt about going to Gene's vault is the biggest takeaway that I've had from there. It's like the other stories that he told, he's kind of like rehashed over the interviews he's told over the last couple of years, but how he felt about going to Gene's vault versus, how he didn't want to go, and then how he kind of felt dirty after he did go. I think we've all been in situations like that where you're driving somewhere and you're like, geez, what am I doing? Why am I going to this? Should I really be, or why am I doing this? Should I really be doing this? And then you go do it, and you get back in your car, and you're like, I feel kind of dirty for doing what I just did. I shouldn't have done that. I get
Lonnie, give us some examples in your life then.
That's for a different podcast. That's not for this one. So, but I think it's something we can relate to. I think we've all been in a situation like that where you're like, should I really be doing this? And then you end up doing it, and you're like, oh, geez, and you have immediate regret of doing it. And if he does, that's fine. I get it. In Vinnie's mind, and because I don't know, but in Vinnie's mind, he got screwed out of a lot of money from Gene and Paul. So he's like, why am I doing this guy favors? And but I don't know. I thought that was the most interesting part of Vinnie's interview anyway, because that's something that really hasn't been touched on at all.
Yeah, one of the things with Vinnie is they literally took everything. They took his copyrights. I mean, that's a musician's everything, is those songwriting credits were transferred from him to Kiss Catalog. And you can go on copyright.gov and look it up for yourself. The transfers were done. I don't know whether I have the lawsuit, and I've tried to read it, but I'm not a lawyer, and it just doesn't make for very interesting reading. It's just beyond me, especially all of the appeals, and it was a very long process, and it nearly made it to the Supreme Court, Vinnie's challenges, legal challenges against Gene and Paul, but they rejected hearing it, so it was just, that was the end of it. You can't go any further. So I don't really want to get hung up in talking about Vinnie's legal challenges. I think you raised a very good point about Vinnie's reticence after the fact of going to Gene's vault. And he showed up late, number one. So right. It's something that was running on a schedule, something that had to be kept to a certain kind of structure. And Keith will have told Vinnie in organizing his appearance that you're going to show up and this is what's going to happen. That they're going to do the songs and stories at the beginning. There was a format to how the vault was taking place at that point. And when Vinnie was late, and I think I heard at the time that it was because of thunderstorms on the road, whatever, that he was late. and that threw everything out of whack, including Gene. But if you look at the videos of Vinnie interacting with Gene, it was very clear that they were coming at this event from two completely different directions. Gene was pure business. You are here to be my sidekick and tell some stories. And Vinnie wanted a reunion and hugs and touchy-feely, happy. They were both looking for different things out of the experience. And no matter what, I think that was probably a bit of a mistake to air that sort of laundry about being unhappy with the vault, because I think it's better for those years outside of the communication that they had that Vinnie just suck it up. He showed up, and it was awkward, and everyone can watch the awkwardness. So, Ken, something that I've read a lot of on the FAQ, that people felt it was less of an interview and more of Vinnie being allowed to ramble. What's your take on this interview? And I respect Mitch. I think he did a great job. Having spoken with Vinnie myself directly, I know that it's better to let Vinnie talk and go off on tangents. You get some gold in there, and it's also very difficult to interrupt him, because you don't want to knock him off his thought, because you can change the mood and tone of it. So I thought Mitch did fine. Some people are criticizing Mitch's style. Well, apples and pears, take it or leave it. Mitch did a great job, and just let his guy talk, which is what it's about. It's not about Mitch. So what were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, again, there was a lot of information that he's talked about in prior interviews and so on. And though I do agree, Mitch let him go. And I think it was a good idea, rather than maybe in some other interviews he may get cut off or talk like that. So I think it was good to let him go, and yeah, he'd go off somewhere else, but bring up some interesting an interesting subject that he hadn't talked about before. Like, I hadn't heard you put, the thing about the vault pulling over and that sort of thing. On the way to the Gene Simmons vault deal. The other stuff is, I know the legal battle stuff, and I think it's pretty. I kind of always wondered. They didn't talk about the contract, I don't think, in that interview with Mitch, right? And which I found interesting. Maybe they didn't want to. Maybe Vinnie said that he didn't want to talk about it up front. But what would have happened if he signed that contract? I think that was the thing where if he signed that contract, his copyrights or his credits would have been signed over to Kiss, and he'd be a paid employee, something like that. I don't know. I haven't read the contract. But maybe then later on, Kiss just said, well, we're just going to take him off, and, they're going to be our music or whatever. We're going to own it all. So I don't know what went on there. But as far as the other parts of the interview, it sounded like, he didn't want to go to the vault, but then he did want to go to the vault, and it's just back and forth. Plus, I think the best parts of the interview, for me at least, is when he talks about writing the music and who he wrote it with. He was living or stayed at Paul's house or apartment or whatever it is for a number of weeks, maybe. Writing songs there and he wrote with Gina, obviously, also. I find that stuff interesting, and about how him and Bob Ezrin was working on Heart of Chrome. When he mentioned Bob and Bob's style of producing.
He seemed kind of back and forth on Heart of Chrome, where he couldn't get a straight answer out of him, where I don't think he really truly remembered a whole lot about it, because he said, Bob, he did this, and he never really gave you a really solid answer about Heart of Chrome.
Right. And then the other thing about the music too is he said there's a bunch of songs he has that were left off of, like
from Revenge.
Right, that were written. He says, I don't know why these other songs are better than some of the songs that were ended up on Revenge,
right?
According to him, of course.
Well,
man, I'd love to hear what those are.
No,
I mean, reproduce them, put them out with a new band or something. Do something if they're that good.
Yeah,
let's get them out there.
Exactly. If they were that great in 1991, why wasn't he doing something with the Leftovers in 1992? I mean, we all kind of know why he wasn't. And come on, how many co-writes did he have on Revenge? Was it 3, I think?
3.
Yeah, did he think in 1991 that Paul Stanley was going to have another album with 6 Vinnie co-writes on?
With him not even in the band.
With him not even in the band. So I don't think it matters how good those songs were. That was one of the sections of the interview that I really enjoyed. And, curse technology that, this interview was afflicted by multiple disconnects because it was right at that point that he was talking. And he actually it sounded like he kept talking. And when he finally realized that Mitch was
he's not there anymore.
They call it back. And then you can never recapture kind of that stream. So some of that stuff is lost. And that's the stuff, again, when we go back to talking about Vinnie performing live and I start bemoaning what happened with Memphis, that's what I want to hear from Vinnie. I want to have him play a riff from Heart of Chrome or the genesis of a song that he was bringing to Gene or Paul at that time, and then just to talk about that song. Play the riff briefly. I don't care if it's on an acoustic or an electric, just with a little stack behind him. I don't need him to play a whole solo or to speedball on me. I want to hear the riff and as an intro to him talking about the song, because the guy can tell an engaging story. People who've heard some of that get a little bit of a taste of what he was talking with Mitch about. And that would make a great web series as well. Just short little 5-minute videos. Vinnie in a studio, hold the guitar, think Metal Tech, without him going into Metal Tech mode, please. That's really not what I'm looking for. And again, it's personal taste. But play a riff, talk about the song, 5 minutes up on YouTube.
Yeah.
If you've got all these thousands of followers who were actually following him on Facebook before all of that kind of went a bit weird. Think of how many followers an official Vinnie Vincent YouTube channel could have, and then he could get the ad revenue for that as well, for those videos. So it's not a much, but if you got 60,000, 100,000 views, just little bits of pieces, even if he's just, playing here's a demo tape from 1992. Here's my original idea for Unholy. Play 30 seconds of it and then talk about it. People would be playing those videos, and it would be more interesting. But let's get back to some other parts of the interview. I mean, he got angry, and some people thought that it was anger, unhinged anger. I didn't really take it as that way. Having I've had personal interaction with Vinnie on a phone call, and he got very animated and energized in what he was talking about. So some people have interpreted that as an anger energy. I really just see it more as an energized, exclamations, all caps, talking. When
passionate.
Passionate and also pissed off. So there is a little bit of anger in there. But like get a life, fuck off. What was your take, Lonnie, on the energized?
I liked it. I liked a little bit of the attitude that he showed. Talking about people were saying this show's not going to happen, and putting out the expletives about it, and not wanting to hear it. And I get it. And people have a right to say what they want to say on the internet. Everybody's a critic. But I enjoyed hearing him get upset about it. And Vinnie's no saint. Vinnie's had his mistakes along the way, and Julian's a prime example. He was going to go see him in Memphis, and then the show got moved to Nashville, and I get why people are skeptical that this isn't going to happen, and it's just. But he was very adamant and passionate that this is going to happen, and nothing's going to derail this from happening, but. For some reason, in today's society, where everybody is told not to be a hater, and everyone's told that, that everybody deserves an equal chance and an equal shake. And I know Vinny's screwed up, and he's, led people down maybe paths that they shouldn't have been led down with, the box set with this whole Memphis deal last year. But Vinny, for whatever reason, with the Kiss Army, is a free target. And you can say whatever you want about Vinnie Vincent and get away with it. You can't. And but in today's society, we're supposed to be told, no, we're supposed to be accepting of everyone. But Vinnie Vincent's a free target. I don't understand that. And I think that's where Vinny's coming from, is that, Vinny says, F off. It is happening. And I think he's tired of being the free target. So I understand where he's coming from with his not anger, but with his frustration and with his energy about the show that he's doing in June.
Ken.
Yeah. Well, I can see him being upset about hearing these people saying, "Oh, it's not going to happen. Why put my money down on it? Already lost on prior events that were canceled and so on." He's going to have to prove it. I mean, before people start believing. I guess I don't even believe it at this point. It may happen, but he's going to have to prove it. And if he goes there and it happens, and he does his whatever jam it is, speed jam or space jam,
speedball jam.
Oh, yeah, speedball jam.
Are you telling me you don't have the CD? You don't have the CD?
I don't have the CD. No.
Shame on you.
I know. I'm bad. But anyway, so Strawberry Jam. So the Speed Jam, yes. So if he does it and proves that he can do what he says he's going to do, show up on time and do all that stuff, and actually can, do play the guitar and rip some, excellent solos, then at that point, okay, I'm on board. You can do what you said you're going to do, and then at that point, to me, Vinny wins. I guess he's vindicated to a degree, because right now in that interview, or in listening to that interview, he nothing. There's no blame on him. It's nothing. It's his fault, and I guess again that's where it goes from Lonnie's saying that there's 2-3 sides to the story. Maybe some of it was his fault and some of it was the other party's fault, and it's just we probably will never know really, but anyway. I just think he's just going to have to prove himself on this, and maybe not just that one, maybe additional events or products like a box set or new music or whatever.
Yeah, you know what? It's like someone who's gotten out of jail for stealing or some other crime. They've done the time. Yeah. They've done the crime and paid the time or whatever.
Right.
But they have to keep proving themselves over and over. Now, when Vinny came back out onto the scene in January last year in Atlanta, it wasn't all, puppy dogs and, unicorns. Yeah, he was there. Derek brought him back, but all the cluster around that was Derek's doing, organizationally, so the negative. But Vinny did one very good thing that day. He addressed the box set issue head on and was, apologetic. But that's never going to be good enough, because that is an albatross that is always going to be held over him. So he's got to, to my way of thinking, he has to continuously address his past. There's the history of what happened in Europe in 1996 as well. None of that baggage disappears just because everyone was happy for a weekend of him being on stage in Atlanta and, signing our stuff. And, well, he did the photos, and we can't blame him for the bad photos. But, he did his thing, but he has to remember that there are a lot of fans who got burned. They got burned in Europe. They got burned by the box, and that doesn't go away. And promises don't mean squat to people who've been burned. Promises don't mean anything to anyone other than him. And, you know, I'd like to see him continue to address all those things honestly, humbly, and also stop promising stuff that he can't deliver. That's kind of more important than anything. I mean, going back to this interview, there were some great sections. Again, he's talking about Laura Nero. He's talking about Dan Harmon, his early stuff.
That early stuff was cool.
You know, I was just waiting for Mitch to ask about Little Anthony and the Imperials and Connecticut Recording Studios and working with Fred Lisbius and, you know, the jazz stuff. And, you know, I mean, hopefully there'll be other opportunities for Mitch to talk to him. I think Mitch has already posted that he's planning on doing a series with Vinnie album by album. Well, I hope he does the pre-album stuff, you know, Edgar Winter, you know, Carmine as well, you know, Rockers, Warrior. There's so many fascinating things, but when he's talking about, you know, going to Laura's house and playing and Dan and going on tour with him to Europe, I mean, those are fascinating stories, which I'm really interested in hearing more of in a structured way, you know. If Vinnie was able to kind of put notes together, you know, again, this comes back to also a Vinnie doing a autobiography. You know, I am interested in that history. I am interested in, you know, who was one of those other sessions? Tommy Rock, the Kashmir and LaCou, Happy Birthday USA, and all that stuff from the 70s. And you know, you can do a whole book on Treasure and Felix. And he just, you know, scraped the surface in this interview, again reminding us, if you're listening to that there is still so much for Vinnie to talk about, to tell us, to share us, that he's never kind of shared. In 86, he's promoting Invasion. In 88, he's promoting All Systems Go. So there really isn't the scope to go back and talk about that stuff at the time. And we know so much more now, or we think we do, and it'd be nice to hear from Vinnie, you know, how did he get the gig working with Hitchhikers or Black Satin, you know, get R&B bands. You know, I love that stuff, and, you know, hopefully Vinnie can, you know, remember a lot of it. I would hope the amount of time he spent at CRS in the early 70s is still fresh in his mind. I mean, I'm just trying to get my thoughts together here, which is a little bit not easy to do, just coming in and getting out of the car and going straight into a show. But he talked about having every show that he played with Kiss recorded. Yeah. I mean, does that pique your interest? I know he's got some, that's for sure. But
that does pique your interest, though. I mean, as a hardcore Kiss fan, that Vinnie comes out and says, "Oh no, I have professional type of recordings from every Kiss show I've ever played, from every Creature show, every Lick It Up show." Whether he has every show, I don't know, but you know he has some. He's not making all of that up. You know he has some of it. I mean, that's pretty enticing for a hardcore Kiss fan that he has all those recordings, or quite a bit of recordings out there.
I just have images of an intern at Kiss's lawyer's office listening to this interview and taking notes, Ken.
Yeah, is it? I mean, I assume it's like soundboards or something. Like maybe he worked with the soundboard guys and say, "Hey, at each show, you know, record me, plug it in and get me a tape of this or whatever." It would be interesting if he did have that, and because a lot of the Creatures and Look It Up era, there's not a lot of stuff out there. I mean, there is, but not as much as some other
as other periods. And it's one of the most fascinating periods of the band's existence. So
the other thing I noticed that he really likes Look It Up. I think obviously because he contributed so heavily to that album, and like when we reviewed it, I said, you know, it's like a Vinnie Vincent album with Kiss backing him up, because his footprint is all over that.
Yeah, his signature is all over that.
And I, you know, to this day, it's one of my top. It's probably the top 5 album for me, in the top 5.
Yeah, my only question for Vinnie, you know, going from those questions about the the soundboards or whatever recordings he has from either of those tours would be. Vinny, what full videos, pro videos, do you have from either of those tours?
Well,
that would be
especially Creatures.
That's the follow-up question.
That's
what videos you have.
Yeah,
the pro shots.
That's the money question. I mean, he also talked about recording all the kind of rehearsals with Kiss, the writing sessions, and all of that stuff as well.
Oh yeah, that'd be interesting.
So again, that's another reason to be kind of concerned about the comments about Gene's vault experience, because that none of that stuff sees the light of day without the cooperation of Kiss. And so that means Vinny can't make money off it, and Kiss can't make money off it.
Unless they pay him for something like some Creatures writing material or Lick It Up demos or something, and they make a Kiss box set out of it. For that album,
I don't think Paul's
some kind of agreement.
Pay him any more money than he has to.
Yeah, and then you end up in the same sort of situation. I mean, I don't know if either of you remember, was it the Blizzard of Oz 30th anniversary edition? Or
jacked up.
When they were talking about all the demos and stuff and couldn't make a deal for whatever reason, so none of that stuff, that the rehearsals. I mean, Jesus, it's the same sort of situation. I mean, I'm not going to equate Creatures as being on the same level as those two Randy albums, but it's still fascinating. And I mean, who wouldn't like to hear, work demos of, any of the songs Vinny was involved in?
Well, it's just like the Back on the Streets with Paul Stanley for lead vocals. We've all heard that it probably exists somewhere, but God knows where. Maybe Julian has it. He's just not sharing it. Who knows?
Problem.
It wouldn't be me. It'd probably be some other fat guy.
Oh boy.
So he also mentioned 3 albums. I don't think I care about albums unless they're recorded and ready to go. I mean, he was talking 20 years ago about re-recording All Systems Go, and I was excited by that prospect. If you go back to 97 and all that stuff, again, I think at this point Vinny needs to kind of muzzle the hopes and just talk about what he has right now. Just talk about what is actually deliverable. But I also think a lot of the reaction to this interview is just mean-spirited. I hope for his redemption. I hope that he can I hope he can find a place, number one, where he's happy and healthy. Number two, where he's spiritually at peace with whatever is going on in his life. He's had a tough go, and none of that ever changes. But stop digging holes for yourself. And again, going back to Miami last year when he was on stage, barely able to play, rhythm, that did not look good. So when we talk about the new shows, and I understand why he's doing, like Mitch's show, he wants to do a show. And that's proven by doing Memphis and then it going wrong, and Nashville going wrong. And now doing another thing in Nashville. It's clear he does want to do something. And I want him to be successful at that, even if he's not doing it my way, which is the song stories. But I think he has to prove to people that he can play more than 4 by Fate. And someone who was at the rehearsal the night before said that he plugged in and he did a Vinny. Yeah. We need to see something like that on video, clearly not corruptible, not so, because people will say, "Oh, that's fake. He sped it up. He slowed or whatever." That's a track. Something in a way that can demonstrate that he can play. I just love to see him standing there, hold a guitar, plug it in, rip something. I don't care if it's just like a riff from Speedball Jam, let it resonate, and him just look at the guitar. So you don't think I can play?
Have him do that, do a riff, give you the middle finger, and that's it.
Drops the
That'd
guitar.
Be perfect. Drop the mic, drop the guitar. That's what he needs.
Drop the guitar would be freaking awesome. Let it ring. So you don't think I can play? Thunk.
And just walk away from it.
Just ring.
Because I want him to. I mean, as a fan, I got burned by Memphis. I had expectations and hopes of going there, and it all went down the drain. At the end of the day, I got my refund. I was out, I think, $200 rebooking for my United flight, and I couldn't do Nashville because that was at the same time as the Kiss show, so I rebooked and went to the LA Forum for the Kiss show. So I chose Kiss over Vinnie. If he books things at the right time, then maybe it's doable. I can't go in June, but I hope it happens. I hope it's done in a way that he can take all of this energy that he obviously has. If he's spending 90 minutes on the phone with Mitch talking about all these things, then he's obviously got drive and motivation, because otherwise it would just be pointless to be talking about any of this stuff, getting worked up about people not believing him. Yeah, take the naysayers and prove them wrong. People tell you that you suck. Turn around and prove that they're wrong. Keep trying, keep fighting, prove people wrong. I mean, pick up Paul Stanley's book and read about him wanting to prove people wrong. And prove them wrong, Vinny. The ball's in your court. Plug in that guitar. I don't care if you haven't been playing like that for 30 years. You can relearn it. Just because you said you played guitar 7 hours a day, it's different on an acoustic than a performing musician. Work it out. And then mic drop us.
I'd love it.
Guitar drop us.
Would absolutely love it.
Guitar drop us. Yeah. No, I mean, that would be awesome. That'd be fucking awesome. If you think of how that little video of for Atlanta, how well that went over, he needs to start utilizing YouTube a bit more. I've mentioned a couple of ideas, playing a riff and talking about the songs. Start building up some ad revenue. Get all those people who are on your Facebook pages to like you on YouTube, Vinny. Just start small. Stop trying to talk about 3 albums or stuff that can be misconstrued. Because I think overall, the interview with Mitch was very good. There was a lot of good gems in there that can be developed, things that can be topics. And, get back on Mitch's show and start talking about these things. Go sequentially. Start with the earliest.
1 step at a time.
Yeah. It doesn't all have to be before June, but I think he does have to prove pretty soon that he can do something with the guitar. Mm-hmm. I think that's important for everyone. All right. Any last thoughts on that, or should we move on to the big interview?
Move on.
All right. Move on. That's a nice Paul Stanley cue for a Paul Stanley.
No pun intended.
Wow.
All right. So
the only thing, only at the KissFAQ podcast because you get something like that. So
yes, that's right.
That is just super high quality. We really put effort into these shows and think about these things. All right, so I don't remember what night Paul Stanley's interview ran because I don't have Access TV, and it took me most of the day the following day to actually figure out that I could just log into my Comcast account and stream it for free, even though I can't watch it on TV.
Tuesday night.
All right.
Monday or Tuesday night.
Take a sip of your beer and then tell us all about it.
Oh, it was a pure delight is what it was. Dan Rather, I didn't learn a darn thing during the Paul Stanley interview. When he started, at the first 5 minutes, he goes, well, we wanted to be the band we never saw. I'm like, oh my God. How many times do I get to hear the same fucking shtick over and over and over again? I used to go to shows. I used to be the one in the crowd. And now, Gene and I put the band we never saw. And I'm like, oh my God. It was the same. I didn't learn a darn thing. It was very tiring, I thought. I love Paul Stanley. Paul Stanley is my favorite member of Kiss. Hands down, my favorite member of Kiss. But it was the same rhetoric over and over and over. It's the same stuff. It's just recycled material. And he came off as a very polished. And in my opinion, almost too polished. Obviously he knew the questions going in. He knew what Dan Rather was going to ask him. He's not going to take him off surprise. We're going to put it on national television. He knew the questions. But he just came off to me as being too polished and wanting to sound too much of an intellectual. Like, you're Paul Stanley. You're a rock star. I'm not saying you're stupid, but you're Paul Stanley. You're a rock star. You're not an intellectual. You're not a high-level thinker. You know what I mean? And I'm not trying to criticize Paul Stanley. Paul Stanley is my favorite member of Kiss. But he's not a Harvard graduate either. You're Paul Stanley. You're rock star supreme. You're the greatest frontman ever. I don't need Paul Stanley coming off as an intellectual. I need Paul Stanley coming off as Paul Stanley from like 1978 or like 1985. Not Paul Stanley from 2018 where he's just, well, you know. And be your, I don't know, I guess be yourself. Don't pretend to be someone you're not. And in the interview, he's talking about that he's always been true to himself. And I'm like, this isn't the Paul Stanley I grew up on, is what is presented now. But I've probably said enough, and I should probably back down.
Yeah, not to quote Paul from his interview. What he did say during this was that pontification is dangerous and ultimately worthless. I thought I'd just say that after your pontification.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think what I was most interested by it, number one, there are a lot of good photos in there of him as a family. I mean, him looking like...
That's true.
Him with his sister out front of their house looking like Cousin It, which is obviously from his new book, Backstage Pass, which comes out on the 30th, and they didn't mention that at all during this fucking interview. I mean, Paul, failure to merchandise is a crime.
Gene would be very disappointed.
Gene would be sitting there going, he didn't hawk anything. God. I mean, that was one of the things, but I disagree with you, Lonnie. We've heard it before, but I felt that he displayed a vulnerability and some of the underlying issues. He talked about therapy. He let people in a little bit more, talking about his childhood issues. That he's still dealing with to this day, which he makes clear that therapy is an ongoing part of his lifestyle and something that he uses as a tool for whatever ends is not entirely clear. Maybe those ends are to be pretentious, as Lonnie kind of alluded to.
Maybe I've read Face the Music too many times, and maybe I've heard it too many times.
Yeah, again, when you think of the audience that Paul is not speaking to Kiss fans on Axis TV with Dan Rather. I mean, Dan Rather, I thought needed like an injection of caffeine or something because he was...
Oh my gosh.
Holy shit, he's old.
Look like he was in a dose up.
Yeah, I was thinking of Bilbo Baggins at his 11th birthday party, kind of falling asleep while Paul was answering. Ken,
where am I?
we need some reasonableness injected into this.
Well, yeah, this interview wasn't directed at, it wasn't done for Kiss fans, obviously. The Kiss fans already, if you're a big enough Kiss fan, I guess, all of what Paul said. This is just for the Axis TV type viewers, which is probably the 35 to 55, age range of
they
people.
Mean 55 to 80?
Maybe, yeah. Dan Rather. He's over 80. But anyway, so yeah, he is. So from that standpoint, it's like, okay, I understand, but obviously they were probably canned questions, the way he was able to respond to these. And plus some of these questions he's already heard 1,000 times, so he's got his canned response. Now, as far as the talking more about his the therapy, even the thing on going in at 15, walking into the hospital or whatever, and looking for therapy, or at that point, and then what else? The other stuff about his ear, yeah, he's more upfront with that stuff now than ever, because I think he realized that it helps. It's talking about it help other people who are in that same situation growing up, whether you're a kid or whoever. So
I think him talking about it has helped him confront it as well.
Oh, true.
I think from a therapy point of view,
self-therapy.
Yeah.
Right. I agree. But the things that I kind of just, I don't know, it bothered me so much is when he talked about, Dan Rather asked about Ace and Peter, and he says it would be, Paul says, would it be part of the celebration? He goes, and Paul says it would be callous to not have Ace and Peter as part of the celebration, it wouldn't make any sense. But he says, and plus, Dan Rather asked him about, has Ace and Peter expressed wanting to be part of that, and he said no doubt they would. No doubt that they would want, love to be part of this. They would be love to, but it doesn't say that. Yeah, they're going to have them on the tour or whatever. The other thing that kind of when he talked about a partnership with Gene, he pretty much went, took some shots at Gene. Even though Dan wasn't necessarily looking for that. They were just talking about a working relationship, but he just went into it, and at one point he said, I guess around 92, he said that they weren't on, or 93, they weren't on speaking terms.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And that he says, I wanted very little to do with him. Which is like, oh wow, and then the other thing, maybe Julian, you're going to talk about all this, but about created. They must have gave Paul Stanley's people, or Paul Stanley must have gave Dan Rather, of course, Kiss information. They talk about the design of the Kiss logo. The Kiss logo was designed by Paul. No, it wasn't. And then these they said many Kiss album covers were also designed by Paul. And they show Crazy Nights, Creatures of the Night, and Rock and Roll Over.
All of which were his idea, the concepts. So while he didn't execute them, let's be fair.
Okay.
To have been an art director, Dennis Woollock for the Crazy Nights, Paul had the concept. Same with Asylum, though they should have put Asylum up. That would have been a better choice.
Asylum.
And getting someone to execute it for you. Yeah, Paul has artistic ownership in designing Sonic Boom as well, for that matter. So I don't think those are. I don't think that's a fair criticism, to be honest.
Yeah, but it's misleading. I think it's misleading, at least for the viewer. They say, okay, oh wow, he did that album cover. Wow, that's pretty darn awesome. Because they talk about
there you go. That's the voice of reason right there. I agree that he should have said, yes, I conceptualized these and had people execute them. The caveats of truth, rather than it suggesting that Paul painted, rock and roll.
Yeah, the other thing with the Gene and Paul relationship, I don't think they were ever friends. Maybe for a short period of time when they first got together, maybe a little bit, maybe not. But I think it's been strictly business from pretty much almost day one. It's just a business relationship. Yeah. And yeah, once they leave the Kiss show or they're not doing anything Kiss related, they're that's it.
Yeah, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I totally agree.
It's fine.
Yeah, I think there's never been, it's like brothers, that you've got the same parents, maybe some of the same goals, and, and that's that. You come together, you work well together, you have a common vision, and you both bring separate energies and ideas to make a better whole. And I think that's totally what they are, which is why I didn't take what Paul was saying about Gene as being a criticism of Gene. I think he was just being very matter-of-fact about it, probably so blasé at this point of this is just how it is, that maybe it is still shocking to us how Paul views his relationship and is able to present it in, almost a flippant manner, that you're going, whoa, not talking to Gene, not really being friends with Gene, being completely different. Well, at the end of the day, I don't really give two shits if Gene and Paul like each other or not. I like the music that they've made together. I like the band that they created together with Peter and Ace, as well as Vinnie, Eric, Tommy, Bruce, Mark, So for me, I don't get upset with that. One thing I did find myself doing during the interview was I kept having the Elder songs come into my fucking head while he was talking. So that at one point he's talking and I'm hearing The Oath in my head. It was just like the soundtrack to this interview was like The Elder, just a boy. I'm just a boy, And both he and Vinnie were talking about fucking cars. What would any of these guys know about cars? I mean, aren't they supposed to leave everything to the car wash guy? Vinnie's talking about in his interview that he drives the car now, and if he doesn't like where it's going, he's going to get out. And Paul's talking about the car. There may be 4 people in the car, but only one person's driving. I mean, these car analogies are just so...
It's a little bizarre.
Yeah.
To echo your point, Julian, I mean, I get along with my coworkers at work. I get along with my boss really well. And together we're able to, provide great things and do great things together. But I don't hang out with him on the weekends. And I don't hang out with my coworkers on the weekends. But when we get together and we time to do some work, we get things done. And I think a lot of people can echo that. I don't think a lot of people hang out with their boss on the weekend or their coworkers on the weekend, but when you go to work and it's time to work and it's time to do your job, you produce great things.
Yep.
You don't have to be best friends after 5 o'clock.
Yeah, a band is a business after all, especially
Correct.
one
It's a
that's
partnership.
been around for nearly 50 years. So,
the other thing I did do after watching that. I actually went back and I watched the Gene Simmons interview that he did with him, and what I don't know. I thought I enjoyed Gene Simmons' interview with Dan Rather better. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because of the immigrant stuff and making it in America and that whole deal. Where Gene started from as a kid. It hits me more than the other story. I don't know. I mean, we've heard both stories so many times. I mean, to a degree, they're somewhat similar, obviously. But I don't know. I just think I enjoyed. I felt like. I don't know. Both of them were very, interviews with Dan Rather were very kind of those canned. Again, he's asking questions that they've heard a million times, and they've said the answers a million times, and we've heard them all a million times. So again, I guess it's just a demographic that they're going for as part of the viewing audience, and I just got to think of it that way. That it's just another interview.
Yeah, I think at this stage, really, whenever the band goes or band members go on anything national-wise, fans should probably not bother tuning in because I don't think they're ever going to get anything out of it. I mean, my takeaways, again, were some of the cool photos, and I was happy to see some of the cut shots that they did in this interview, including Heaven's on Fire, Forever. So you got to see Eric Carr and Bruce Kulick on national TV or cable TV. So that was more of the positives that I took out of it. Paul's been taken to task for one of the comments that he made during that interview was, "I always did my best. I was true to myself," and all of that, which is a lot of people took as being somewhat disingenuous. But then again, I think people project too much on what they think the truth ought to be with what Paul is saying. Whereas you have to remember, and I think, Lonnie, you said it, he's polished. Very
polished.
He's been asked similar questions for the last 40 years at least, and how many different ways can you really say it? I thought it was interesting to hear about the art. And yes, the big circle. I know people mock it and love that meme with the elephant holding a paintbrush next to the circle. But Paul talking about that and saying how he didn't sign it. Again, the insecurity coming through of not wanting to maybe admit that it was his in case people didn't like it, rather than putting his name on it and saying, well, fuck you, this is my art, take it or leave it. And now he sold $10 million worth of art. I mean, again, let's be clear on $10 million worth of art. People are buying it because it is Paul Stanley.
For sure.
And
That's why I bought mine.
Would it have $10 million in sales if it didn't have that signature on it? It would be probably a very fair question. But again, art's in the eye of the beholder. I'm not criticizing Paul's art. I'm just saying, would he have $10 million in sales without his name attached to it? Would Wentworth be saying, come and see this unnamed artist?
No. That's why I bought a Paul Stanley painting. That's why I bought it. Because I got to meet Paul. And it's a Paul Stanley painting. I mean, come on. I got the Paul Stanley portrait with, him in the makeup, and it has the lyrics of Love Gun down the side of it. That's why I bought it, though. Kiss wasn't doing much at the time. They weren't really touring. I got a little extra money. I'm going to do it. And I'll get Paul Stanley's coming to town. I get to meet Paul, and I'll get to do this. It's pretty cool.
There's some other interviews that Dan Rather has done where the group is there. The actual whole group of a band is there, whether it was like or most of the group, or a few people in the group. It was like the Doobie Brothers and some other ones. Even when there's another one where they had the Replacement. I can't remember which band it was. I don't know if it was one of those bands, and it was. I found it actually more interesting because they talked to the guy that was the Replacement and asked him some questions about how is it about trying to fill in the shoes for this other guy and so on. It's too bad that they couldn't have just couldn't have done it with the whole band, the current lineup meeting with Tommy and Eric and Dan could ask those guys individual questions pointed to those guys instead of one guy taking over, Gene or Paul taking over the answering of the questions, which usually happens in a lot of the general interviews that you get. So I think that would have been better.
Like in that classic rock mag, some of those themes, again, Tommy talks about, would be great to see Dan talking to Tommy about those. And maybe Tommy needs a therapist to ask him those questions as well, which would be interesting. Or you end up with something like the Australian show Sunday or whatever that was, where, again, Tommy and Eric are token. I think they spoke to Eric and didn't ask Tommy anything on that. He's just standing there. So I don't want to see those things. Something else that Paul went into on his interview that, again, I don't think this is totally canned. I don't think that's fair. He opens up about his marriage, his first marriage. And
a little bit.
A little bit, about, again, it's the sound bites and things that you're probably going to see in bold print in his book. The only person who can change you is you. Everything happens for a reason. I mean, these are like chapter headings, aren't they, really? But I think it's cool that he goes into them.
Cliff notes.
I wish they had just tied into his book coming out, and he should have had a copy of his book, and saying, I talk about these things. It just seems like a totally missed opportunity in some ways, because those themes are presented to an audience but not developed. Why is he talking about his first marriage? He's happy he's got Evan out of it, and that he obviously learned something from that. He's thrilled with his second wife and how she's a partner and loves his 4 children, and obviously is a great dad to them. But there's just like too many kind of ellipses.
Why is there no even whether it's not in the actual interview, but in between segments, having an advertisement for the book, get Paul's new book coming out on Amazon, whatever, later in May. It'd be an opportune. Gosh, I don't know why it wasn't advertised. They want to spend the money to market it, I guess.
Yeah,
I thought it was really bizarre. I mean, you guys are talking about bringing up past members to the end of the road tour, and I know that this interview was filmed before the start of the tour.
Right.
And he talks about, they're all welcome. Well, we've done a full leg, and we haven't had one guest appearance, whether it be Ace, Peter, or even Bruce Kulick even come up for a song.
Probably,
And I think I think that's disappointing. Not even Bruce, though. I mean, they get along with Bruce. Why couldn't Bruce come up for one song and do "Hide Your Heart"?
Because he was on tour with Grand Funk.
I get it, but come on.
And the others probably want
These
a certain amount of money to play, pay to play kind of thing.
And then they dropped "Hide Your Heart" from the set anyway.
Right, then they dropped "Hide Your Heart" from the set of 2 weeks in.
He had his chance. Could have been at one of those.
He had his chance.
When he didn't show up, they took it out of the set
Bruce
list.
gets screwed again.
We're not playing this anymore. But again, just to remember that this was filmed in November or December. It sounds like December. And then there's such a lag. You've had the whole tour take place. The gloves came off in that time as well, don't forget. Yes. So, again, I don't think Paul says things. They all say things. Everyone says things. They kind of say things that they think people want to hear. Of course those guys are welcome. Yeah.
They're welcome. Yeah.
He did say never say never. He does say that, which is okay. That's something, you should say, because you used to say never when never putting back on the makeup and never getting back together to do a reunion or whatever. So yeah, never say never.
And some of those people are, that I think he addressed them, and there are always people who want to see him fail, are fans. You see them on message boards, you see them on Facebook, you see them on Twitter, you see them everywhere. There seem to be quite a lot of those people now that technology allows them to have such a loud voice. And, maybe it's good for Paul. Maybe it's good for Paul to see them out there and have those little microscopic voices magnified in such a way. If that's what keeps him driven, if that's what keeps him wanting to do projects like Soul Station or, to keep painting or jewelry, because there are naysayers out there who want him to fail, who want to criticize him at every turn. Remember that little chubby boy in that photograph? That little chubby boy is still holding up his finger because he is Paul Stanley. He's not Stanley Eisen. He's Paul Stanley, and his whole life is basically living his life is the best response to his critics. Mm-hmm. Is the way I kind of look at this. And he's so... I love it when he talks. I mean, yeah, total softball interview. Total softball.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't think Paul would ever allow himself to get into a situation psychologically that was combative and maybe a little bit more probing and dangerous. I mean, if you go in there without any of the questions, you better be prepared. You also, either it's going to be an interview where he's ripping off the microphone and walking out, which is probably the last thing he would ever want to have shown. It's safe. Yeah. And how much safer do you get than Dan Rather? He doesn't know the probing questions to ask Paul Stanley about his career and life, does he? But you still... No. What my point is, and again, I'm guilty of pontificating, is there's a lot of good stuff in there if you kind of dust off the bullshit. That you have a very vulnerable person still to this day who puts himself out there every single night and in every interview and still challenges himself and his underlying issues. And there's one last thing, I guess, before we wrap, is Phantom. I loved hearing about that. Yeah. Again, that was
interesting.
Oh, yeah. And the other thing is, regarding more interviews, I would love to see Dan Rather. If they're going to do Gene and Paul, let's do an Ace and a Peter if he can do it. I can only imagine. I don't know how Peter would be. He may be, the way he is now, which is kind of happy with his life and how it's all turned out, and look back on things maybe differently than he did when he was writing his book.
I think Peter would be the most interesting of all of them too.
I think so.
From not playing with the band for 16, 17 years now, to just kind of look back with an open lens of and clear perspective of, you know what, I don't need to kiss anyone's ass. I don't need to do anything to please anyone in this interview. I can just be myself and tell things how I really hear it. I think Peter would actually be the most interesting of all of them. I don't know if Ace would really remember, you know, kind of like Ace's book, would remember a lot of the detailed facts surrounding events. I think Peter would be the most interesting, being from the outside. You know, we talked about Ace and Ace really wanting to be back in the band, you know, 6-8 months ago, and it not happening. I think Peter's more content and more happy with where he's at in his life right now. And I think it would be very interesting to hear a Dan Rather interview with him, of a look back with him, looking back on events. I think Peter would actually be the more interesting, because he wouldn't have an agenda or anything like that.
No, I think Dan would relate very well to Peter. I think that could be a more interesting one. But then again, you know they're not going to get the same time as Gene and Paul get.
Sure.
It's just
that's the problem.
The unfortunate reality of what is. I think Ace probably has a better chance of, you know, showing up on an interview, but it wouldn't be anything on the sort of stature as Dan Rather. But then again, this is cable, so access. It's not like it's Dateline or 60 Minutes. So
no, it's not 60 Minutes on Sunday night or something like that.
No one from Kiss is getting on there these days.
Hell no.
Gene might with Invictus or whatever his drug dealing company is.
Drug dealing.
It's drug dealing company.
Shoot.
That's funny.
But anyway, you could just, you know, if you don't want to watch these Dan Rather interviews, just go back to the Tom Snyder
interview.
Yeah. Interview.
It's always the entertainment.
It's entertaining, yes.
Yep, and it is what it is. So, I mean, those were the two big interviews this week. There's another one that just popped out today, or this morning, I think. That was Metal Talks. Sat down with both Carmen Apiece, and I always...
Appice?
I get it. Come on, him and his brother.
I think it's Appice.
If they could just pick one. Yeah. One of them's Appice, and
just
the other's
say
Apice. Carmine and Jim Crean, who were both on board for the Nashville version of Vinnie's musical performance, have kind of let out a lot of their side of the story and their point of view. One of the things with Carmine on there, you know, saying that Derek's a really nice guy and he's been really sick. Yeah, we've heard that one before. And again, Carmine's a working musician who does look for gigs, so I'm not surprised he said that. But there's an interesting counterpoint from, you know, what Vinnie said, what she said, what he said. You know, go and listen to that for another perspective. And again, like Lonnie said, somewhere in the middle of all of this is the truth. And again, if you're not going to Nashville, if you have no interest in going to Nashville to see Vinnie perform, then what's it matter to you if you were never going in the first place? You know, I would think that anyone not going would at least have hoped for some YouTube video to surface. So check that out on YouTube. It's, you know, again, pretty long. I think it's a good hour's worth of them talking, and they talk about how Jim came into the picture, what Jim did, their interactions with Vinnie, and again, I don't really want to say much more than that. Form your own opinions. So let's leave that there. Vinnie interview, Paul interview. What's next week? We'll see. It's never a dull moment, that's for certain. So
we'll leave that to the show prep meeting right before the show.
All right, so let's leave that there. Let us know what your thoughts were on both of these interviews, wherever you chime in. Thanks for everyone who shared their Dynasty top 10s, or top 9s. There I go. Even if you skipped a lot of spaces in your post before bashing on Charisma. How dare you? Did I ban that guy? No. I know I banned someone this week, but there's a couple more on my radar as well. So anyway, for now, from Ken, from Lonnie, and myself, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye. Thank you for spending time listening to the KissFAQ podcast today. All sales are final, there are no refunds. If you'd like, look us up on Facebook or come over to the KissFAQ message board and discuss the topic we've broadcast today. don't forget to rate us on iTunes, Spreaker, or wherever you've listened to the show. We hope you'll join us again.